Hello everybody, we're back for chapter 13. I hope you guys again are doing okay. It's been almost 2 weeks now that we've been confined. Hope you guys are finding ways to keep busy. If I sound a bit sick, don't worry, I'm not gonna die. It's just I have allergies because of the pollen in the air. So, I'll show you what I've been doing. See, 1,500 pieces. Impressed, huh? I did that by myself. All right, what we have in this chapter is two things. One, the continuation of this disastrous filming, but more importantly, we have a section which could be considered as Tommy's biography. Of course, told by him. How much of it is true, we don't know. So I'll divide my explanation into those two parts. So I'm going to start with the filming stuff because, there's a lot more of it, but I feel like it's less important to go over. So the first thing is on page 209. I just wanted to quickly look at, again, the work that these poor workers have to do. They deconstruct the rooftop set, and as soon as it's finished, Tommy decided to shoot a final rooftop scene. So you imagine, again, you finish taking it all apart, and then he says, oh no, you have to put it back together. I want to do another one on the roof. So people are just working for nothing. It makes no sense what they're doing because they're never explained why he keeps changing his mind and things like that. So it must be very frustrating for them. Page 210, just a quick note here. It's mentioned that there's actually a Room video game. Now, it is true, there is a Room video game. I'll put the link in the description if you want to try it. But more importantly, on 210, if you go to the top of the page, he again tries to ad-lib. Greg tries to ad-lib. To ad-lib means to improvise, right? To add something to what he's supposed to say in his script. Of course, Tommy catches this. He says, no, you do not change script. You say what scripts say. So again, it just shows how hard it is to work with Tommy because, he doesn't let his actors have any, fun with the script or anything. They have to stick to his bizarre words. Page 212, it says Greg basically admits to the moment that he kind of gives up acting. On the bottom of page 212, Tommy has asked him to shave. He says it's very important that you shave. Greg's like, why? It doesn't change anything in the story. Yes, this big moment. Okay, so he shaves, and then as he walks into the condo, again, I don't know if you remember the scene, but it's when they each go ding dong, and then they walk in, ding dong, like they're just all waiting at the door to come in. And when Mark walks in, he's all shaved, and they all go, wow. So it says, if you look at my face, you can detect the precise moment in which my dreams of being an actor are summarily snuffed out. So I'll try to find that scene and put it in the description so you can go check it out. You can really see in his face, he's kind of like, you like it? And then they want to go play football in their tuxedos, right? And they're all going, cheep, 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 cheep. And you can see Greg is just like, chip, chip, chip. He's basically realized, wow, I had all these big dreams and ambition, and this is where I'm stuck, doing a little chicken thing while people are going crazy over my shaved face. It's on page 215. That's the last thing we're going to look at for before walking into Pierre's story. We're talking about the last scene now, the one at the party, right? His surprise birthday party where, everybody, all the confrontations happen. Mark and Lisa have a fight about this baby thing. And then, everybody is kind of getting into a fight. I thought about how sad this party scene really was. Having all of Johnny's closest friends and future wife gathered together to celebrate his birthday, with a child on the way, no less, was Tommy's dream life. But it was a dream life in line with what he thought an American would want. After all, Johnny's life in the room doesn't quite resemble anyone's idea of a perfect life. Working in a bank, not getting your promotion, living in a crappy condo, having a future mother-in-law all up in your business. So this part is really interesting because basically it is true that, when you look at the movie The Room, the character of Johnny doesn't have an ideal life, right? He's a banker who lives in a very modest condo. But for Tommy, in his head, that would be amazing because that's what he doesn't have, right? A future wife, all these friends that are around that just walk in and out of his apartment. He's always surrounded by people. So it is kind of sad when you think about the actual story of the room, and that it is his idea of a perfect life. So then at the end of this chapter, the other big news that we find out is that Sandy is now leaving. He has been there since the beginning of the movie. He's helped out a lot. But at this point he says, look, I have another possibility to work with the director of photography of Steven Spielberg. So of course it's a big opportunity, and he leaves for that. Let's move on to the more interesting part, Tommy's biography. Now, this starts on page 206. Greg says, long ago, on the far side of Central Europe, Communist bloc Europe, sometime after the death of Stalin, a young boy named T. Now, we can assume that it means that Tommy's name, his real name, is not Tommy, but something, maybe it's Tomasz or something like that, but he doesn't want to give his real name, of course, because he doesn't want anybody to know anything about him. So we have an idea that he does come from Europe somewhere. Like I said before, good chance that that's around Poland. One of his first memories is of standing outside a cinema watching 101 Dalmatians through a crack in the door. He's chased away eventually, but that night he dreams of being among those tiny spotted dogs safe inside Disney's reality. For him, watching a Disney movie, right, a cartoon, it's a big contrast with his daily life, which is in this, communist, bleak, gray, everyday life. So when he sees like these cartoons and things, it just brings vivid colors to his gray life. And that's the first time that he falls in love with American culture. Another thing we notice that we find out that's interesting is that his English isn't great, but most of what he actually learned by himself. Walk up to items that, if it said bread on it, he would practice bread. So he is self-taught in a way. So it does show a lot of, character and motivation to be able to try to learn a language by yourself without the help of anybody. So for that, he should be commended. The next thing we need to look at, on page 208, he manages to, when he grows up, of course, he manages to escape Poland to get to France. Now, in France, he's one step closer to being in America, right, which is his ultimate goal. So he ends up in Strasbourg, and he is, doing the horrible work that, other people don't want to do. So working in the kitchen, cleaning the toilets, things like that. So his cousin was with him at that point, and on page 208 it says, his cousin is caught and sent back. T is never clear as to why or how this happened, nor is T clear on why he is allowed to stay. Now, this is the first part of the story that kind of doesn't make sense, because if his cousin is caught and sent back to Poland for being an illegal immigrant, well, Tommy or T would also be caught and sent back, right? If they were together, they're living in the same place. So that doesn't make sense. Why would he be allowed to stay? We don't know. So next we're going to skip ahead to page 217. So on page 217, there's another part of the story that makes no sense, is that he mentions being stopped by two police officers who start questioning him and being really rough with him and putting a gun in his mouth even, and saying, like, if you tell anybody about this, I'll kill you and your whole family. Really dark, violent stuff here. And on page 217, it says, when Pierre, because at this point he's now being called Pierre when he's living in France, he doesn't go by the name T anymore. So when Pierre describes this story many years later, he will weep, so he will cry. He will say he survived 2 rounds of Russian roulette and even maintained that one of his officers fired his pistol into the wall to frighten him, though it's hardly credible that anyone would discharge his weapon in a police station interrogation room, right? So this is the second time that we're saying, that Greg is saying basically something doesn't make sense. Because why would a police officer shoot into the wall of a police station, right? That's proof that you're doing something wrong. You would do that outside where there's no proof. So that, again, doesn't make sense. On page 218, he manages to find, he has an uncle who lives in New Orleans. So, oh my God, finally I can have a connection to America, right? So he writes a letter to him, and eventually that uncle decides to sponsor him. That means he says, I can say that this is somebody in my family and I want him to come live with me. Somehow he has a French passport, But how could he? Again, unclear. So third hole in the story, how is it possible that if he's an illegal immigrant, how would he have a French passport? We don't know. So he gets to New Orleans and he's greeted by his uncle called Stanley and his aunt Catherine, who his aunt is an American, a real American, right? Whereas his uncle emigrated, the first American Pierre ever meets. So he's super excited about that because we know how much Tommy loves America. So then he makes a friend called Jean-Luc, who's a French guitarist, and Tommy tells him, oh, I want to be an actor, I want to be this and that. So he says, well, you have to leave New Orleans, you have to go to San Francisco. And that's how Tommy ends up in San Francisco.
Finish him!
That's basically it for this chapter. We're going to find out more about his backstory, I think in the next chapter. We'll have to see. So again, answer the discussion questions in the comments. Hopefully these are helpful for you guys to, keep interested in the book and to understand what's going on. So thank you very much, and see you chapter 14. He would that